Welcome to the Packaging Etc. podcast, where we will discuss all things packaging and some things not. We will hear from professionals across all areas of the industry: design, engineering, manufacturing, and many more. We will learn about packaging trends, new technologies, and cutting-edge innovations. This podcast is all about showcasing our favorite parts of the industry, the people, and giving them a platform to share their stories and their knowledge of packaging. Let's take this journey together. And now, your host, Matt Mulvey.
Hi, folks. Welcome back to another episode. Today, we'll be talking with Dave LaMarca. Dave has extensive experience in packaging equipment sales and capital project lifecycle management, and has spent his career working with packaging engineers in numerous roles and industries. Before we dive into that, please hit the like and subscribe button wherever you're listening. I really appreciate it. And with no further ado, I'll let Dave introduce himself. Dave, welcome.
Hey, Matt. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. Dave LaMarca, as Matt said, with quite a bit of experience in the packaging industry the last 34 years, selling everything from tube fillers, liquid fillers, down to palletizers, checkweighers, and robotic solutions.
So, Dave, we going back kind of through our history, one of my first experiences with you was at a trade show where, and it kind of funny, that's a common theme. I do enjoy going to trade shows, but it was, I want to say it was Pack Expo Chicago, maybe 5 years ago. I came up to you you were at the Stevanato at the time, and I came up to you, and I feel like I felt as though I knew you a lot better than you knew me. And when I first walked up, it was one of those, hey, there's my buddy Dave. And you're in your head, you're thinking, who the hell is this guy walking up to me and, bro hugging me and shaking my hand, all that fun stuff. And it was just, I kind of felt the awkwardness after the fact, but I've always felt a comfort level with you. And so when you approached me about doing an episode together, ironically enough, at a trade show, I believe the genesis for this show came from a late night conversation you and I had in a casino at Pack Expo Las Vegas. So
Absolutely.
I'm noticing a theme there with our interactions again. So yeah, again, welcome. And for today's topic of conversation, we wanted to take a deeper dive into what the mainstream packaging schools in the U.S. are teaching their students and how that compares to some of the skill sets maybe you would like to see these schools adapt into their packaging curriculum to better equip their graduates for positions that would deal more primarily with the packaging equipment and your function?
Yeah. Hey, Matt, that's a great question. And yes, it was always enjoyable to meet with you at trade shows. Some of the main packaging schools, if you look at what those programs bring to the student, some look for, whether it's a technology, RFID, virtual design, and prototyping. Some schools may focus on CAD, packaging engineering, process packaging, manufacturing. And then you have some that have a blend of science, math, materials, or food and health. And some others might just be technical packaging engineering, whether that be, shock, vibration to a product, or material testing and distribution and protection. So I think each one focuses on different things, but I don't see that they bring all those together. And I think the biggest one that's missing is the real life experience that you get from actually being in the packaging industry.
Okay. So one of the things that, and again, I can't speak in great detail about the other packaging schools, but being a graduate of Rutgers Packaging and now being an adjunct professor in the packaging program at Rutgers, I do know that a lot of students will finish their degree program with a minimum of an internship and a co-op, or sometimes multiple. They're less concerned about graduating in 4 years and more concerned about graduating with experience. And again, not to set the Rutgers program apart from the other schools and say that it's better, worse, or indifferent, but only because I have intimate knowledge of what these students are going through, I can speak a little more intelligently about it, obviously. So the common theme that I have noticed, though, and something that I've alluded to in previous episodes as well, when it comes to internship and co-op experience, a lot of these students seem to land in more office-based environments. And one of the things that I really tried to preach was getting experience, what I call boots on the ground, right? Be down in where the magic happens, be down on the production floor, be down in a manufacturing environment to fully understand voice of the customer, right? And as a packaging engineer, your customer is going to be the operators that are running the machines and the mechanics that have to fix the machines and the operators that are loading those components and how those components, how the design of those components can make or break their day, right? And things like that. And seeing that firsthand, I think, helps make us all better packaging engineers.
And what you just said is absolutely correct. But between that and maybe reality, it's two different things. My interaction was that the intern showed up and, oh, by the way, Dave, here's my intern for the summer. He's going to download, or she is going to download information that you give them. Okay, great. Oh, here's our intern, and they're just going to watch us or they're going to listen. And I think there's a big difference. So from my perspective, I've run into many interns, and those interns end up doing paperwork, doing information gathering, but they're not really hands-on applications that I've seen. And so it's something that runs through the industry, in my opinion. And there's a difference between saying, yes, check the box, I did an internship at X company, or I actually achieved something through my internship at the end of it.
Okay. Yeah, no, I see the definite distinction between those. Thinking back on my experiences, so when I graduated from Rutgers, I had completed 3 different internships and 1 full-time co-op. And one of the internships was I was kind of working part-time on the side for one of my professors. He had a consulting business. And so there really wasn't anything goal-oriented about that. It was just experience. To be honest with you, it was really just it was a paycheck. I made a little bit of money on the side.
But I think even if you look back at me, I started at a company. It took me a year and a half just to understand the process of packaging. Now, that's different in college. You take those classes, you understand it. But I think, if you go company to company to company in the field, like you do as a salesperson or someone that's, trying to solve a problem for a company, I think you see everybody does it differently. So there's no real continuity from place to place, building to building, company to company. It's different. And that's the difficult part.
Yeah, and I think that that's a microcosm of what they're going to experience once they get out into the workforce. So I don't necessarily see that as a bad thing, that they get that lack of continuity from internship to internship or co-op to co-op. But gaining those experiences at these various companies kind of gives them a little bit of a flavor for what they can expect after they graduate. The challenge that I believe a lot of these internships and co-ops face, an internship theoretically is a summer internship. You've got 10 weeks, 9 weeks in the summer to bring someone in, onboard them, train them, try to get something value added out of them versus just sticking them at a computer and saying, here, key punch this data into this Excel spreadsheet, where it's clerical work versus something value added for them. Even co-ops at 6 months, it's a challenge. Speaking in the pharmaceutical industry, we talk about projects in years. And so to effectively manage a co-op or intern program in the pharma industry or in the equipment side of it, where the lead times are so extensive, these students are never going to have an opportunity to experience vendor selection process and URS development and design review and FAT and installation and commissioning. they're never going to get to see the full life cycle. So as a professional that would manage this type of program, it's on us to give them a better understanding, a clearer picture of at least part of that life cycle, knowing that you're not going to have a student work. I mean, I guess theoretically you could have a student work for you for 3 years throughout the entire life cycle, but I've never heard of that happening. I don't know if you've seen that in your experience.
No, nope, I haven't. And I think that's maybe one of the parts of the educational curriculum that can be changed. Maybe that's, where you have a real world open-ended problem and you're required to do cross-functional decision making. And the course is really built around, I have a problem. How do I bring that problem to fruition? How do I solve it? How do I ask other parts of the company to help me solve that problem? I just think there's something missing there.
Okay. So before we started recording, you had mentioned problem-based learning, and I feel like you're kind of starting to dance around that topic now. So do me a favor and just expand a little on, from your perspective, where you feel problem-based learning could or should come from in a college curriculum. And I mean, how would you envision these schools implementing something like that into their packaging degree programs?
I think you find problem-based learning in a couple of different areas in school, which is basically engineering and business schools, which use problem-based learning as part of their curriculum. And I don't think it's far to say that you can integrate that type of scenario into a packaging program, right? So current, and I'm speaking from my side, but current packaging curriculums really it should be a structured course and it's limited. I don't think you see that from beginning to end, but you being a part of that, you probably can give me a little bit more insight.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've taught 2 semesters, and each semester was a different class. This upcoming semester, I'll be teaching a 3rd class, so that'll give me a little bit more flavor as to at least how these 3 classes are administered. And again, I have a little bit of leeway as the professor to determine how the course gets administered, as long as I'm covering the required content.
So the question is, do you think, or should problem-based learning be its own class?
It's a tough question to answer. I don't feel like there's a black and white, paint with a broad brush response to that. What I can tell you is, in the 2 classes I've already taught and in the class I'm about to teach, I try to take the material that is presented and scrub it and present it through the eyes of an industry professional and say, yeah, this is good information to know. I'm less concerned about you memorizing what year so-and-so invented paper. I'm less concerned about you memorizing the ASTM test method for XYZ test. I'm more concerned about, do you understand why that ASTM test method would be selected? And the information you're going to gather from those test results, are you able to interpret that information and apply it to your iterative packaging design, into your equipment design, into your overall supply chain? And I try to present the information in a more practical fashion than hey, let's see how well you memorize these slides.
Yep.
And part of that, it kind of dances around the whole problem-based learning, I think, to assess their analytical skills.
Yep. Do you think it should be maybe then integrated into existing, like, say, materials distribution and design courses?
I think that could be implemented pretty much anywhere. So you mentioned cross-functional, and we've talked about different projects and how they're executed, and the various cross-functional teams that have a seat at the table in executing these projects. Packaging engineering, packaging engineers, being one of those seats, but it would be interesting. It would be an interesting exercise to provide an opportunity for these students to see the life cycle of a project through the eyes of the other members of their cross-functional team to better help them better understand, I guess, the different types of personalities and backgrounds and whatnot that they'll be dealing with. And so, when you talk about, problem-based learning, I feel like there's an opportunity there for maybe how lawyers go through a mock court, maybe, I don't know, maybe a mock project for the packaging
Yeah,
students.
I think you're right on. Packaging kind of sits right at the intersection of, say, engineering, supply chain, marketing, operations, and quality. They all get into those types of functions. They touch them. They at least have some kind of interaction with those groups. But typically, and again, you being a professor, you know better than I do, students are typically in silos. They're learning this function or this function and that function, but they're not really all kind of brought together into one course or one area of study.
Okay.
So some of the enhancements are kind of what you had said. So you can do some role playing exercises. So packaging versus manufacturing versus marketing, and kind of have that interaction. Group projects requiring input from these groups, these multiple departments, can also really give them the ability to understand how they're going to interact in the real world and what's going to happen. Maybe, an assignment based on real cross-functional conflicts, cost versus a brand, or speed versus sustainability, or line configurations and different things like that. I think those are really things that you experience when you're out in the real world and you're actually in a project. And you being a project manager too, along with other things that you've done, I think you can kind of see where that would be beneficial.
I think in addition to beneficial, my mind starts racing into how could something like this be achieved, or I don't even know if you could pull something like this off, but I guess where my mind is going right now is, let's say, and let's just pick Rutgers because of familiarity, a Rutgers packaging engineering student, a Rutgers business school student, a Rutgers marketing major. If you were to pull students from each of those degree programs or multiple, let's say you were to pull 5 from 6 different departments, right? So it's a class of 30 kids and it's a technical elective, but it's basically a semester long mock project. And the
Right.
packaging engineer represents packaging, and the marketing person represents marketing, and the business major represents, the finance group, and you have a supply chain
Right.
person and a quality person, and an industrial engineer maybe to represent more on the facilities side, and how those decisions that you make. I go back to a project I worked on years ago where we were launching a new product, and the label space was very, very small. So we had looked at doing a shrink sleeve, but because of the alcohol content of the product, it was an OTC, the alcohol content either pushed us into a steam tunnel, which they did not have the boiler capacity to support, or a dry heat tunnel. But because of the alcohol content, we would have had to build an explosion proof room. And so I learned a great deal of information just trying to figure out how I was going to label this device. I learned a lot about the facility side and the implications of those decisions and the budget implications of those potential decisions. Having an opportunity to go through that type of experience before I graduated, I feel would be eye-opening, number one, and two, hugely beneficial to me and everybody else that is able to go through that type of class and that type of experience as
Right.
early in their career as possible.
Right. And I agree with that. So how many projects have I worked on where it was, a 300-minute line, a 400-minute line? And so the lead machine, which is typically, say a liquid filler or something like that, down to an inspection. And as you go down the line, the more processes you add, the more issues you create. So understanding that this little label can make that from a 400 a minute line down to a 200 a minute line is essential. Even though you may not know exactly when you're doing it, it's at least understanding the method and understanding the process behind it, which is not something you really teach in a class all the time. So it's a combination of the two, class and out, in your internship or in your co-op or in real world.
Real world application. Absolutely. I was about
Yes.
to say that. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit because I'm curious. One of the things that was pushed on me as a packaging engineering student, or as I should say as an engineering student in general, was a class called expository writing. Now, I don't know if that is still part of the general engineering curriculum or not, but I remember questioning at the time, I'm going to be an engineer. What do I need to take expository writing for? And the response that I got basically was, well, you can be the best engineer in the world. Not to say that I am, but it's just a conceptual statement. You can be the best engineer in the world, but unless you know how to communicate to people, what good are you going to be out there in the professional world? And it really kind of stuck with me that, hey, you know what? Yeah, I could be the smartest person in the room, but if I can't impart that information to the various people and personalities and backgrounds in that room, what value am I really bringing? And so I look back on, and I actually took a second semester. I took 2 semesters of expository writing because I actually really enjoyed it. But I guess this was a long-winded way for me to get to my question of how do you feel, or how would you assess the overall communication skills of these students? And is there something that could be or should be done to improve their overall communication skills when they're coming out of college?
Matt, that's a great question. And I think that is definitely something that needs to be addressed, where basically graduates of these programs sometimes struggle to, explain technical decisions to non-engineering people. So to the marketing people, to why we can't do something or why there's an issue with something like that. And so that's something that they need to do, defend their design choices, maybe in a post-mortem review. Is that something that's part of the curriculum? So I think that's another important part that needs to be added. Communicate, trade-offs in the business-friendly way, like, okay, you can't have this, but we can do that, and we need to achieve this, but we can't achieve that. And just understanding, how that affects the business in which they're operating.
Okay.
So I think you add maybe a communication module to the curriculum, technical writing skills, who's the stakeholder and how to communicate to the stakeholder, and a design defense. Why am I designing the line the way I am, and why does it need to be designed like this?
Yeah, and I think there's definitely applications there above and beyond just the scope of packaging equipment.
Yeah,
Obviously
absolutely.
that can be that is something that 100% can be applied across the board within a packaging curriculum. But yeah, and part of it is not just the communication skills, but to what we previously discussed, their analytical skills, their
Right.
ability to analyze and accurately defend their decisions, and then being able to communicate them in a room full of various functions.
Yeah, I mean, do you even see them including a business case rationale into part of their curriculum? Because that's really important. Who am I speaking to, and how am I going to translate that information in a business case scenario?
I'm just trying to envision how that might play out in a classroom.
It would be a unique part of the curriculum. Do a business case scenario and defend that scenario. And then, but keeping in mind, all the different areas that you're going to touch by that business case: quality, production, marketing,
So
all
that
those
may tie
different
back
things.
into that mock court example, that mock project
Correct.
example we discussed, and
Yep.
potentially implementing not potentially, definitely implementing that dynamic into that overall class curriculum. That could be interesting. So what about supply chain classes?
Yeah, supply chain, I think we've all kind of learned about that over the last 4 or 5 years. Supply chain awareness is definitely present, but it's not really integrated, I don't believe, in the curriculum. And if it is, it's probably not focused on very much. Just going back to Rutgers, they definitely have an intro to supply chain class, if I'm not mistaken. Some of the other colleges offer it, but I don't think they focus on it. So the missing elements are really real logistical modeling, which would help in some ways. Supply chain analytics would also be something you might want to add. Packaging impacts cost to serve would also be something you might want to integrate into that. And e-commerce for fulfillment, really, and damage rate modeling. You can do all these different things. Vendor management, which is another key part of it. How do you manage a vendor and do global sourcing? I think for yourself, you've gotten into vendor management and what it takes to really manage the vendor customer relationship.
Yeah, well, some vendors are more manageable than others, but
Well, I'm definitely not manageable.
we won't go into that too much. But I guess the one thing I struggle with on this line of discussion more than the previous ones, and I'm definitely not going to get the reference correct, but when talking about sculpting, a true artist doesn't add clay, they remove strategically. And so we can't just, and when I say we, I guess I'm referring to all of packaging academia. We can't just en masse add all of these different classes. We have to strategically strip away some of the less valuable or less value add parts of the curriculum. And I'm wondering if this is something that packaging schools would embrace and want to include in their program versus leave this one on the table, or I should say leave this one off the table, and have it be something that their graduates receive on the job training for. Because these schools are going to walk a fine line between, we want to make sure our students, our graduates, are getting the proper technical training versus day one, they hit the ground at whatever company they end up hiring into. That company is then going to be responsible for training them on specific on-the-job type stuff. So when it comes to vendor management, I think back to my college years and how much I might have, and again, me personally, how much I might have gotten out of a class like that versus just kind of on-the-job training and on-the-job experience, and how much my early development in my professional career was a result of absorbing interactions between my superiors and my peers and our vendors. I mean, still definitely something to think about. I'm just kind of dancing around the idea in my head.
Yeah, I think though for the supply chain part, right, you could maybe have a school that partners with supply chain departments, bringing them in and maybe giving real life applications to that. You can add a course that would maybe be like packaging and logistics systems, or enhance a packaging course with adding logistics. Integrating real transport problems into coursework. Like, how do you get a machine? Let's just use COVID. How am I going to get a machine from Europe to us? Not using the normal flow of the logistics system. So, we all kind of learned that as we went through it. So there are a lot of real life applications that you can give them examples of how to do this.
Yeah, and there's an element of you don't know what you don't know, right? So
Correct.
you go back to 7 years ago, no one was thinking about what would we do if a global pandemic hit.
Right.
It wasn't really on anybody's radar. Now it is. What else could or should be on our radar that hasn't happened, but could be, you know what I mean? Kind of thinking about, I mean, how many contingencies can you really plan for at the end of the day?
Right.
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 And so you can kind of get into that analysis paralysis where you just, there's so much to consider that you don't even know where to start. And so again, that goes back to, critical thinking, your analytical thinking and how well you can assess the situation and how quickly and creatively you can pivot.
True. So I think, Matt, on a final note, I think we need to understand uh, the internship outcomes, employers, function, duration, hands-on versus design and marketing, to maybe evaluate how much real world manufacturing, distribution, or cross-functional learning occurred and what they were exposed to. So maybe in your history, you can tell me how that's handled. Do you really gather that information and do you use it?
That's a great thought. So I guess just to make sure I'm understanding, you're kind of dancing around the idea of when a student finishes an internship or a co-op, is there a postmortem review at the university or college level to validate what they were exposed to, what functions they performed and what they learned? I can tell you from
Exactly.
my personal experience, granted it was over 20 years ago, but from my personal experience, there was zero oversight at that time. Fast forward to today, and I have absolutely no idea. But I think it's a great question. I think that would be a huge value add. My understanding, though, of the current process, I know my process was I went out and I got my own internships and my own co-ops. I just went out and I beat the street and, went through one of my professors or just applying for jobs on my own outside of any university influence, if you will. I want to say it is similar in nature now, where a lot of these companies will come to the university to say, hey, I have an internship or a co-op, and the university or an administrator at the university will then disseminate the information of that job and how to apply to the students. But ultimately, the responsibility falls on the students to apply for, eventually interview for, and then if they get the job, then you go and you work at that internship or co-op. So I don't know how involved the university is beyond that, but I think it's a great question. It's something I definitely, after today, I want to follow up on and get some information on, because if it is being done, I'm not aware of it. And that's fine. Not to say that I have to be aware of it, but if it's not being done, what could be done? Because I think you've kind of happened upon a great opportunity, or a huge missed opportunity, if it is indeed a missed opportunity.
Maybe you can interview the alumni from the packaging program and ask them, what their experience was, what skills they find are missing in graduates today entering the workforce, because there may be even another section that you can gather information from and integrate that into the program.
That's a great thought. I know, I mean, I can say I had never really given that much thought before. I don't know. Again, you don't know what you don't know. So I don't know if these schools are already doing that, but I would like to think that some of the best engineers, packaging engineers out there in the workforce administering internship and co-op programs are people that worked internships and co-ops themselves and apply what they liked and didn't like about their own experiences to make it iterative, to make the experience for these current students that much better. I'd like to think that that is the case, and that is exactly what's happening. But no, that's definitely a good thought. I definitely want to look more into that and ask a few questions and see what level of sophistication involves around that whole postmortem internship co-op process. And if it's none, see what we can do to kind of get that ball rolling. I do think that would be a value-added exercise. Absolutely.
Me too.
All right. Anything else you wanted to touch upon before we wrap this up?
No, I just want to thank you for the time to be a part of the podcast, and it was a pleasure and a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. I appreciate your time today. Again, everyone, please consider hitting the like and subscribe button wherever you may be listening. I would very much appreciate your support there. Feel free to reach out if you have ideas for future episodes, or if you would like to participate in a future episode. Please, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me in the contact us form on my website, www.precisionengsolutions.com. If you want to reach out to Dave, feel free, send me something and I will make the connection. And I guess with that, Dave, again, thank you so much. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll talk to you again next time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Packaging Etc. podcast. We hope you enjoyed the content and maybe learned something new. If you have ideas for future guests or topics, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to send a connection request on LinkedIn or visit www.precisionengsolutions.com and use the contact form. Once again, thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us once more on the next episode of the Packaging Etc. podcast. Until then,